Hello friends, Mike here. Welcome back to Mac Truck Bookstop. Today we're talking about Cockroaches by Scholastique Mukasonga from the country of Rwanda. Although she emigrated to France and was living in France at least at the time of this writing, which is the early 2000s. This is a memoir. So we've had books in this project so far that blur the line between memoir and fiction. Most are solid fiction, and a few that blur the line. But I'd say this is the first that is solidly a memoir, 100%. And so it is all about the author's life, and it's her first major work, specifically dealing with the events that led up to and the aftermath of the Rwandan genocide, which, if you're looking for something that is a political exploration of that, or that's going to give you exactly what is the story, explicitly of why that happened, this is not the book. This is an experiential memoir of what it's like to grow up and experience that and have your family be involved in that, and many of the author's family are victims of this historic event, and it's more of the experience of not quite being able to fully understand what happened, and that's actually quite effective. But you have to do a little bit of research, I think, outside of the book to understand it more fully. But just as a raw experience, we can all understand the idea of one group of people based on an identity hunting down and destroying another group. It's happened in many places in the world, and we're all on some level familiar with the idea, although it's very, very difficult, and I included find it very difficult to comprehend what it means and what it is, and understand what drives that social movement of mass destruction and killing of another group of people. This book does allow you to meditate on that. But it does not explain it, even in this context. Now, from what I can understand, you have the Hutus and the Tutsis, and they are separated not based on language or culture or religion. I could be wrong here, but from what I understand, the distinction between the groups is simply class. That historically, during colonialization, the Tutsis, who are the minority, were in charge of the Hutus, and the Rwandan genocide came out of the Hutus' historic hatred, and once the Hutus gained power, kind of wreaked their vengeance, and this hatred of being the underclass carried forward into the genocide. So the authors, Scholastique, if I'm pronouncing that right, she and her family are part of the Tutsi, the persecuted group during this time when the Hutus are in power. It begins in like the 60s. Now, the Rwandan genocide wasn't until 1994, so this begins in the 60s when she's growing up, and you realize, well, I realized that the the genocide was incredibly predictable, because the persecution and the killing and the mistreatment of the Tutsis while the Hutus were in power goes all the way back to the 60s and goes throughout the author's life. And we're not talking like little things either. It's for at least 30 years before the world knew about this widely, because of the 1994 events. It was fermenting this whole time, and it was already happening, just not on as big of a scale. Everything just kind of exploded in this event. That's about what I was able to understand just from the book and doing a very small amount of research. It's a tough book to swallow, like emotionally. It's not long. You're looking at 160 5 pages, and what I do appreciate is I bought this as a used book online, and the previous owner wrote their name and email in the front cover, and I've debated reaching out to them to say hi and that I read it, and they also filled the book with like their notes and stuff, which was really cool. So it was kind of an additional way to interact with somebody else who'd already read the book and their thoughts. And I wish I honestly, even though I have bought a lot of used books for this project already, I do wish I had more that were filled with notes like this, but you just don't know when you buy online. It's just kind of a fun surprise that happens sometimes. And so it was almost like reading it with a friend in a way. But yeah, this memoir has really just very experiential. You get a sense of what the kind of day-to-day Rwandan rural culture is like. A picture is painted of an extremely, by United Nations standards, an extremely poor country, and probably by their own standards as well. In terms of material wealth, you don't have like potable water or basic amenities in much of the country, at least from what we're seeing. The geography was beautifully talked about. Again, I mentioned the culture. There's a very nuanced view of the Catholic Church. I believe it's the Catholic Church that's throughout this book. There are good people in the Catholic Church. There are bad people that this author has encountered in her life and the stories that are told here. It really centers around her family and the way her family has to survive and constantly be moving and fleeing. It's just a life of being a constant refugee, but there's also downtime. There are moments of tranquility and peace that kind of give you a breather between these, and as kind of a spoiler, I suppose, so if you're already interested in this book, definitely go for it. It's a first-person memoir, pretty short, but very impactful, so go ahead and read it if you don't want any spoilers. But I just want to say that the most impactful thing about it was that it doesn't describe the events of the 1994 explosion, as it were, of genocide, because the author was in France at the time, and that's one of the most haunting things about the book, is that she deals in the end with being one of the survivors, and they're just really, and she tells the stories of the few survivors of her family that she can in the aftermath. So we get this really haunting buildup of all the events that led to the event, but we aren't in this book actually present for the all of the horrific things that happened in the early 90s. That, like the famous movie Hotel Rwanda was made out of. I suppose I haven't seen that full movie, but that would be a good one if you want to be like in to feel like you were there, maybe. I don't know, but this book has this sort of strange detachment from it and dealing with that sort of survivor's guilt at the end. And there's really, I can't say I've read anything that has quite the same emotion, and it's definitely emotionally impactful, but still just hard to wrap my head around. I can sympathize and I can empathize with some of it or relate in my life, but I don't know. It's impossible to say like, oh, I understand what that feels like, and it's almost incomprehensible. The idea of losing, 80% or more of your large family to this one event, these people you've known all your life and people who have grown up, and it's an incomprehensible amount of just tragedy. And how does one understand this, if we want to use such a, it feels kind of ugly to use the word social phenomenon for this sort of mass killing event. What else do you call it? How do we begin to understand it and prevent it? There are people that certainly have tried and I found myself thinking about it, like how does one of the Hutus that participated in this, how do they live with the guilt knowing that they participated in, for example, to demonstrate the violence of some of this book, the hacking people up with machetes, or um, the violations of women. It's how does somebody participate in that and get caught up in just this mob mentality? And I mean, you see that in many revolutions throughout history and things like that, and it's been in other books that I've read up to this point, and I'm still no closer to understanding it, I don't think. And that even brings me to kind of what this project is about. But I just want to sum up Cockroaches, because I don't feel like I particularly need to get into much more. I guess I could talk about the writing style briefly. The writing style is very matter of fact. That was what made it interesting, and I don't know how much that has to do with the translation, but I found the writing style to be very like straightforward. Even describing some really horrific things are almost described in like a matter of fact just way. Like, he did not die that day, but he died 20 years later, and it's just and it's kind of like some of the victims in the book are described as explaining their own traumas that way, and it does kind of remind me of like how a victim of a horrific event may need to detach themselves and speak in kind of just a very logical way, to distance themselves from the trauma that they feel in order to be able to tell the story. I was thinking about that too, because I was kind of a little bit shocked at sometime how these events, which are so incredible, like in a bad way, incredible in a horrific way, are described in such plain, kind of, direct and maybe monotone way at times. That's not to say the writing's bad. It's simple, it's direct, it gets the point across, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It includes very nice details for most of the way through. It's just matter of fact. It's matter of fact. So yeah, if this sounds like something that would interest you, I mean, it's definitely not a joyful read. It's a deep, short memoir that covers a long period of time, but really just nails the details where it needs to. It's crafted to, I don't know if I'd say perfection, but it's crafted to what it needs to be, and it's certainly one I'd recommend. It was a worthwhile read. Now, the second part of this video, I just want to discuss some of the things about how this book made me reflect on this project of reading the world as a whole. So if that kind of would bore you, which I don't blame you, feel free to go watch another video, or stick around, yeah, because mostly at this point, this video project is mostly for me. I'm completely being selfish with it and just wanting to get my thoughts out while somewhat trying to improve my speech. I'm really trying to cut down on the ums and the uhs, and work on editing my videos a bit if I feel like I'm losing my train of thought. Nothing crazy. I don't want to spend a lot of time editing these videos yet. It's just to get my first impressions, but yeah, here we go. So now I can not say that this project is, the purpose of this project is not to learn everything about the world, right? A book, whether it be a memoir or a piece of fiction, is one window into one person's mind, and in the case of this project, somebody who happened to be born in a different country than the last video. Now, what is a country? A country is made up of so many things, of cultures, multiple cultures, languages, geographies. It's pretty hard to actually define what a country is in its totality. Of course, I'm sure there's the Webster definition, and the most direct way to describe it, it's a political entity, right? But it encompasses a lot when it comes to a reading project like this. And so the point of this project is not to finish it and say, okay, now I know everything about the world. I don't even think I can say I know something about every country I'm reading, because I've left some of these books with a one-time read-through really not coming any closer to understanding the country. But what I do believe in with this project is its ability to find human universals, and also to learn what are not human universals. I've already, in this project, looked at epic myths from just about every part of the world's past. Even in these first 30 videos, we've got an epic of 13th century China. We've got an epic of medieval Western Africa, a story about Shaka Zulu, which is sub-Saharan Africa before colonization, and all of these display very different outlooks on human value than, say, the Greek myths that I grew up with, being very based in Western civilization, and seeing that there are differences in value systems, but there are also universals. The idea of power corrupting people exists in every single culture, and the question of power and how to wield power correctly, and almost like no one has really figured it out yet, which is the incredible thing that I'm learning about this book. And this book actually Cockroaches played very interestingly off the last book I read, Shaka, from Lesotho, because this is almost from the perspective, Shaka Zulu's tactics verged on genocidal in the book. I mean, he executed people for everything, and I don't know if it was exactly targeted at any point, but there were parts where he would wipe out like an entire village, or that would be an ethnic group, essentially. And this book is like from the ground perspective, of those people, and it's not like the value system is different. Thomas Mafolo, writing in 1920s Lesotho, realized that Shaka Zulu was a monster, that genocide is monstrous, and that might does not make right. That is not the way we want to organize societies. That book is well aware of that. Just as 100 years later, Cockroaches is showing us in memoir form from the perspective of one woman, rather than kind of this third-person overarching perspective. So these two books that I just read for number 29 and 30, I feel played off each other very well, and gave me that sense of what is this project about. It's about, learning what are those human universals that most concern us in storytelling, and in what digs deep to our soul and crosses culture, but also to appreciate that while we do live in a globalized world where in many ways cultures are converging, we all come from different places, and the world has been built in different ways, and yet there are questions of the past that we're still dealing with, despite all our supposed knowledge that I don't even believe that artificial intelligence is going to fix. So, of course I had to bring that up. Why did I bring that up? Anyway, so I don't know why I bring it up, because I know virtually nothing about how it actually works, but can we really avoid it anymore? Like, I guess we all at this point kind of need to educate ourselves on artificial intelligence, and be open to talking about it, whether we know anything about it or not, because then at least we can find out what we don't know, but questions of power in that context have never been more relevant, and that is one of the major themes that's coming out of these books. Not only questions of power, but what is a fulfilling life, what is a hero, what is a heroic life, and what is attainable for a person. I mean, what does a heroic life really look like? Most of the heroes of the past are just as much monsters as they are heroes. And what is to be expected of us? How do we define our value systems in light of the fact that greatness does not equal goodness? And that has been a theme throughout human history as well, I believe. So these are just a few things. These are just a few things that I'm thinking about. So I guess it turned out that this discussion was not as irrelevant to the book I just read as I thought. Yeah, well, thank you for watching. I think that's all I have to say today. I'm going to continue with the next book shortly, in a few days, or whenever I finish it. And thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe if you enjoyed. And thank you for following me on this journey, if you've already been here. I hope you have an excellent day or night wherever you are.